I asked my mother when she was in her 80s. I think I was in my 40s at the time. And I said, if you could take anything back, what would you do differently? And she thought for a minute and she said, I would have left my dancing shoes on a little bit longer. And I love that answer. That answer stuck with me. It's like too many of us, we take our dancing shoes off too soon. And the truth is, we should be dancing all through life, living as vitally and vibrantly as we can till the very end, knowing that human development, psychological development, spiritual development doesn't stop at a certain age. It can be with us till the day we die.
You are now tuning in to the Going North podcast with your host, best-selling author, professional speaker, and member of the John Maxwell team, Dominic Dom Brightman. And every Monday and Thursday, we're going to hear the voice of a different author sharing their gifts, stories, and expertise to help you charge forward in life. Now let's get on with the show. And today on the Going North podcast, where we bring you some fabulous humans from across the globe, today is no different because we got one heck of a fabulous lady in the house, because this lady right here is an advocate for the positive potential of aging, a fellow podcast host that proves that women aren't finished living their best lives at 50, 60, and beyond, but instead hold to the promise to become wise elders of our culture. This fabulous lady right here celebrates age and shows how it's a privilege to grow old, how every single day is a gift. And Peter Pan's mantra was that he was never going to grow up. This sexy lady right here, her mantra is that we never stop growing. She's not only that, she's also the host of the Coffee Table Wisdom podcast, promoting healthy aging in body, mind, and spirit, as well as author, blogger that writes about universal life, transforming forces, grief, gratitude, loss, and love. And she recently released this delightful little book that should be on every coffee table, nightstand, and on the top of your head if you like to balance books, known as the one, the only, delightful little book on aging. So let's give it up for this lady right here, the one, the only, SR herself, not senior, but Stephanie Raffelock. How you feeling today, ma'am?
I am feeling great. It's so much fun being on your show. You have one of those silky smooth voices that's so welcoming. I looked forward to this all week.
Oh, okay, all right. I'm glad the feeling's mutual. That's right. So we got silky, we got sexy for Stephanie. Any other S adjectives that you like to use for yourself too? Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. Woohoo! Well, it is great having you on the show, Steph. It's great having you on the show, especially with this mission that is long needed, especially for some folks who claim they are old by 30, when truth be told, they are far from it. Heck, even those who are 60, they're far from old too.
Right. So much of it has to do with attitude. I asked my mother when she was in her 80s. I think I was in my 40s at the time. And I said, if you could take anything back, what would you do differently? And she thought for a minute and she said, I would have left my dancing shoes on a little bit longer. And I love that answer. That answer stuck with me. It's like too many of us, we take our dancing shoes off too soon. And the truth is, we should be dancing all through life, living as vitally and vibrantly as we can till the very end, knowing that human development, psychological development, spiritual development doesn't stop at a certain age. It can be with us till the day we die.
Ah, yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. Kind of reminds me of one of your awesome one-liners where you talk about old as a destination.
Yeah, it's it's not a destination. It's a process. And it's a continuous process. And I think if you speak with some older people my age, most older people my age, they're going to tell you that in their hearts they still feel like that 20 something. So it's like the heart, the consciousness of one is not what changes. What changes is your knees get a little creaky, your ankles click when you walk up the stairs. You lose some of that athletic prowess, but we can keep our minds sharp. And honestly, we can keep our bodies a lot fitter than we do in this country. I'm a big advocate of walking because anybody can walk at any age. It's not something that you have to have special equipment for. It's not something that you have to train for. But if you can get out and walk for an hour a day, that contributes so much to your health. And it's such a great de-stressor. And that's the way you want to go through life. You don't want to carry the stress around with you, nor do you want to be unhealthy. So it's a way to contribute to your fitness and alleviate stress. Get out there and walk. Do you walk?
Oh yeah. Oh yes, indeed. Especially during the day job when it was still a day job. I'm usually on my feet a lot. I have a desk and I probably sit at the desk for maybe 5% of my shift, if that.
Yeah. Good thinking. Good way to go. I think that desks are our downfall in the workplace. I love it that so many people right now are able to do their jobs from home. Is your job something you could do from home?
Part of it. Day job's a librarian, so right now we're
Uh-huh.
still locked down for the whole COVID nonsense at the time of this recording, and looking to reopen soon once to get some things in place for social distancing because of this whole virus nonsense spreading around. And to be honest, I mean, it's it's no telling what could happen if it continues to spread or not. So just taking a
Right.
safe route at the moment and doing
Sure.
some online stuff.
Sure. I think a library is a great place to be.
Ah, yes, indeed, especially since you're a fellow author.
Yeah, I love libraries. I loved them ever since I was a kid. It's a great place to go get lost. It's a great place to go get quiet. And don't you think like books? I mean, books are wonderful things in and of themselves, but I kind of see them also as interior design elements. There's something about a room that has books in it that just feels more homey. It feels more welcoming than a place that doesn't have books. And even though I have a Kindle, I don't really use it much. I use it when I travel because it's easier than packing a couple of books. It's not as heavy.
Definitely agree with you on that because I mean it's funny enough. A buddy of mine quoted some random statistic or some random study at one point where it mentioned how some folks actually feel a lot smarter when they go into a library or a room full of books. It just puts you in that element of, hey, I feel like being studious or grabbing one of them and reading. And
Right. It's inspiring. There's something inspiring about that environment that, like you said, it makes you want to grab a book and read it, or it makes you want to learn something. Those are great qualities to have in one's life.
that's right. And to extend the youth, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes. It's good to be curious. I mean, to walk through life with curiosity at any age, I think is a good thing. And it keeps our minds open. It keeps our hearts open to be curious about other places, other people, other things, not just our own little bubble that we live in.
Oh yeah, especially if that bubble came out of a bottle.
Well, there's that.
Just the bottles for the kids, just those bottles, not the wine bottles.
Right, right.
I'm pretty sure folks have had enough wine bubbles for the moment, depending on what they do.
Do this is so funny because I'm not much of a drinker, but I have to say, in the last 2 months, I have thought more about drinking than I have ever thought about it in my life, probably. Just that desire to, like, take the edge off the cabin fever. And plus, if you turn the news on for 5 minutes, it's all doom and gloom. So there's this palpable undercurrent of a little bit of anxiety mixed with fear, mixed with a little bit of unrest and unknowing that it just permeates everything right now. So it has led me to think a lot of evenings about, gee, this would go good with vodka.
Yep, and
Yep.
that's why I stay away from the news.
Good enough reason. You're not missing anything, believe me, it goes on ad nauseum, the same thing every day. I sometimes I think that we miss the point, in all this COVID stuff. I mean, 2 things, it definitely shines a light on the places where our society is broken. But the other thing is that it shines a light on the question that we should all be asking ourselves, which is how can my living through these times, how can my being in these times make me a better person? That's the question that should be on the news. That's the question we should be asking ourselves. The rest of this we'll figure out, but I think it would just take the edge off somewhat, this anxiety off that we're all feeling, if we could put just a positive kernel of truth at the center of this. People have lived through a lot of rough stuff before, and we'll make it through this too. But what's really important is, can we make it through this and somehow be a little bit better human being when we get to the other side? That's what I'm hoping for anyway.
Ah, yes, indeed, a better human being, and not a butter one either. That's what I'm talking about, indeed. Yes, because I'm pretty sure you've been on one heck of a trail of self development and self promotion with your fabulous book since the COVID started, being trapped home and whatnot.
Yeah. It was an interesting book launch because, of course, everything at bookstores, all the public speaking events, all that was canceled. So the way that I brought my book into the world was in virtual reality. It was through social media and online, as did, some of my fellow writers who launched books in the last couple of months. And it was very, very different.
That's right. Sit in a cozy chair on video. It's like, hey, how's it going, folks? There's a shiny book right here. It's hardcover. It
Right.
won't give anybody concussion if it was Bible size. Don't worry. It's good stuff.
Yeah, it is good stuff.
Oh, yes, indeed. And it's good with 15,000 of those. That's right. It's extra good. It's extra good. So, what I love about your magical mission is that you're helping folks to realize that you're not done after a certain age and a certain decade. So, there's this magical thing that we all fear about getting older. From your experience, what do you think is the major reason, or heck, there may be multiple reasons, why do you think we as humans fear age and growing older?
Well, we're not as much in touch with the cycles of nature as we were during the agrarian age in this country, when, more people were farmers or lived off the land and families lived together. Um, Families are now nuclear, and they're scattered. So it's not unusual to have siblings in different states and your parents in different states. So we don't even see the cycles in each other's lives, let alone in nature. So that's one thing. The other thing is that we fear mortality. It's like it's that space of, well, what happens? All like to know what happens. We'd all like to believe that maybe we think we know, but we don't really know till we get to the edge of it, do we? So I think that contributes to it. And in this culture where advertising plays such a huge part in identifying who we are, advertising doesn't represent older people in a positive light. Advertising that's geared toward women my age is all about, you should wear this necklace so that if you fall and can't get up, you can reach somebody. You should buy Depends. You should talk to this doctor about this drug for this condition. And it's all about being kind of infirmed or feeble, or not having, a good a good life. And I've met a lot of women in my lifetime, some of them much older than me, that have dispelled that myth, that stereotyping completely. But we still stereotype people through advertising. So we see ourselves coming and going every day, that the only time you see someone older on television, it's because they need a certain drug or they need some special service, and not because they're contributing members of the society.
Yes, indeed. And we need to get rid of that too. And it's great that you're actually working to help folks really change that because, heck, even funny enough, kind of reminds me of how these folks from the 80s, a lot of these actors, I think it was Liam Neeson at one point where he's getting in all these action films and I forgot how old he is. I think it's like what, late 50s, early 60s, and still making action movies. And Schwarzenegger coming back for another Terminator and still keeping himself in shape. And just seeing all these folks who folks think they're past the prime. It's like, yeah, a prime at one point of their lives, but there could be a second prime or a new prime that a lot of folks really don't want to believe that's there, but it's actually there for those who take care of themselves and continue to stay curious.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And I think that second prime is there, especially in heart and in spirit. It's a time when we're called to have a more reflective life, a more contemplative life, in addition to keeping ourselves as healthy as we can. But there's an emphasis on, what did this long life get you? What did you learn? What do you feel is the most important in your life? Certainly my priorities have shifted. I want to be a kinder person every day. I want to be a little bit better every day in the way that I treat people, in the way that I welcome the world, in a way that I share my life experience with younger people. I want to be an uplifter, someone that encourages and supports. That's a different vision in one's 60s and 70s than the vision you hold in your 20s and 30s, when you just, it's your time to accumulate, it's your time to have outward success. And so one isn't as contemplative or reflective about life. But I think that these are wonderful years. And I'm having a great time in this decade of my 60s, and I intend to continue on.
Oh, yes, indeed. That's what I'm talking about. And it's great that you have that mindset and continue to keep it. So, from your experience so far, what's probably some keys for those who are going through the aging process to help them really just enjoy the process of really just aging and actually getting wiser if they choose to do so, since sometimes age comes alone when you
Right, right.
age.
Yeah, I'll skip the wisdom part. Um, I think adaptability is like not being afraid to adapt, because your life is different now. We become more vulnerable as we get older. I can't do yoga in the same way that I used to, but I've adapted. So I do part of my yoga class from a chair, and then I do part of my yoga class on the mat with everyone else. And that's just due to some disc degeneration in my lower back. So I've adapted to that. Adaptability will get you a long distance. Attitude is a big one. What's your attitude? Are you going to wake up and say, you know what, it really sucks to be 68? Or you can wake up and say, thank you. Thank you for this life, for this day. Wow. Let's see what I can do today. So adaptability, attitude, and then of course, activity. It's not a time to just sit around in the Barca Lounger. It's a time to get out and walk. It's a time, if you're still working, see if you can walk to work or ride a bike to work. There's things that you can do that aren't impactful kind of exercises, that are easy on the spine and the joints, that get your heart rate up and fill your lungs to capacity. And I don't think there's anything better than activity that you can do in nature, even if it's just a city park. I used to do something in Oregon called urban hiking, and I would go into the park and then I would go up into the hills and the streets around town. And I did that a lot in the wintertime, because in the wintertime, the trails would be wet and muddy. So if I could do urban hiking throughout my neighborhood, that was good. So that's what I call the 3 A's of aging well: adaptability, attitude, and activity.
Woohoo! That's what I'm talking about right there. Triple A, baby. That's the real
Triple
triple
A,
A.
triple A, yeah.
That's right. So for those with metaphorical flat tires in their lives right now, need to be more adaptable and have a great attitude as you age. Yes, indeed. That's what I'm
Yeah.
talking about.
Stay active.
That's right. Got to stay active too. And I love it. I love it so much because I guess one of my pet peeves is really hearing folks in their 20s saying I'm getting old. So any message for those folks who keep on saying that nonsense?
Well, I'd like to say to them, but you're such a puppy. Um, there's a Netflix documentary on right now with Taylor Swift, and at one point in this documentary, she laments how she's going to be washed up at 35. She has so much more she needs to do now because she'll be washed up at 35. And there was something about that that felt so sad to me. It's like embrace the years, just the way you embraced your 20s. It was like a time of great liberation. It's like we're going to individuate now and go off and live on our own without mommy and daddy. Being in one's 60s and 70s can also be a great sense of liberation as far as what's really important to you. I don't care so much about what other people think of me these days. I'm just interested in living my life as best I can. I'm interested in living my life as kindly as I can, but other people's opinions don't matter so much. So there's this great liberation that happens as we get older. The other thing that happens as we get older, and I especially see this with women right now, 50 and above, is there is a great creative surge in women happening in our country right now. In 2018, more women over the age of 50 ran for political office at a local, national, and state level than ever before in our history. That says something. It's like we've got a lot more juice than we think we do. And we just have to take care of it. It's like taking care of a car. The guy across the street from us has some old Thunderbird car, and he has to baby it a little bit when he starts it up in the morning. He can't just crank it up. And I feel the same way in the morning. It's like, hey, you got to baby it a little bit to get it going, but once it gets going, it drives great. And that's how I feel about aging. It's like, yeah, it maybe takes a little bit longer to get going in the morning, but once you get going, you can drive great.
Ah, yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. And that's an interesting statistic about the ladies over 50 running for office because it's so true. Because, funny enough, I think, at least out here in Baltimore, I've seen a couple commercials with my family when we were watch TV together, and all these ladies running for city mayor. And it's like, wow, like this is probably the most I've seen ladies run for mayor in the city in like ever in my time. Because
Right.
usually mostly guys at one point, and now it's like, all right, so the women are realizing that they can kick butt, and they're really using their creative juices to really get that second wind.
Well, and keep in mind that, women for the longest time, once they were done with childbearing, it was like, well, now you just need to go quietly off in the corner and retire. And I think that women are pushing back against that. It's funny that we have a double set of standards. Like no one would look at Warren Buffett and say, maybe you should have a little lift here under the chin. But we don't hesitate that to say that to a woman. And I think that women just kind of reached a point where it's like, I have so much more life to live. And all of those women want to be in service to their communities, to their state, to their country. It's very, very admirable. And I'm happy to see it. I think it brings about a shift that's good for women and a shift that's good for men, honestly, too. It brings about a balance that levels the playing field a little bit.
Heck yeah, not to mention gives folks that are younger something to shoot for because
Right.
folks like yourself and heck, even one of our past guests, Julie Renee Doring, she, if I'm not mistaken at the moment, I'm not too up on a personal life, but I think she's a single mom in her 60s with a kid that she adopted a few years ago.
Wow.
And she still looks stunning too to boot. And I'm like, wow, like you're still doing the whole parenting, raising a little one as your own. And it's really stuff like that, just seeing folks in their 60s and their 70s doing stuff still where it gives folks like me hope where it's like, okay, when I get up there in age, I don't want to just let Social Security check. I still want to be thriving and giving value to the earth.
Right. Right. And with your voice, you can be doing this kind of work, for the next 50 years.
Woohoo! Ah, yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. Heck, might even get to see you on your 110th birthday, right? Or at
Maybe.
least 118th in this case, maybe.
Maybe so. You never know. I just know it's important to keep going. It's not over till it's over, as Yogi Berra said, right? It's not over till it's over.
That's right. That's right. It's not over until it's over. And I really love that. And it's great that we're having this chat. And it needs to be taking place more across the country because that's really something that folks need to hear. Like, hey, it's not over until it's over. It's like you're not old if you're 30, and you're not done if you're 70. Like, there's
Right.
still more for you to do and more for you to give, and you can still contribute to the world. Heck, you could still probably put some youth to shame nowadays because those in their 60s and 70 plus, they have had more outdoor experience probably too, on top of the younger generation with all these screens.
Right. Right. Not as seduced by phones. And I'm always amazed. Sometimes I see someone on the trails here and they're looking at a phone, and it's like, do you know you're out in nature? Do you know there are trees around you and sunshine and fluffy clouds?
Yeah, it could be selfie stuff.
It could be selfie stuff. That's true.
Yeah, that's probably the only thing. Is like, hey, maybe check an email or checking text or maybe getting ready to take a selfie. But still, it's like just being in that moment and being present, which is amazing.
Yeah.
Ah, yes, indeed. So you mentioned creativity for the ladies 50 plus. So outside of your magical book and your podcast on pause at the moment, anything else you've been creating recently?
Oh my gosh, that's enough, isn't it?
Never.
um, I'm constantly writing. I'm constantly doing my own podcast or guesting on another podcast. I learned a lot about online promotion during this book launch because, as I said, the talk in the bookstore was canceled and public speaking events were canceled. So I'm on a learning curve with online marketing. It's a whole other world. I'm kind of amazed. People have YouTube channels, and I've really discovered some wonderful people. There's a woman on Instagram. I think her moniker is Train with Joan. Joan is 74 years old. She started doing serious weight training when she was about 54. And this woman is cut. She could kick your yaya. Um, Absolutely amazing. And I found her as I was doing some online marketing. And I thought, wow, there's all kinds of people that share my message that are out there in their own way putting this forth. But I think she was my favorite. Train with Joan. Look her up on Instagram.
That's right. You heard that right, folks. She's cut. Slide into her DMs, y'all. That's right. Oh, let me stop. Don't do that. But yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. Well, it's good that you're learning new skills too, and really goes back to the earlier point of staying and remaining curious and staying active.
Right. I mean, isn't that what you want for people when they walk into the library? Is that they come with and just an openness, a creative curiosity. I can learn about anything in this place. That's very cool.
That's right. Cooler than three cucumbers.
Yep.
Ah, yes, indeed. So you mentioned before that you've been on this multiple podcast appearance trail. So is there a question that you wish you'd be asked more often when you're doing interviews like this?
Boy, I never think about the questions I want to be asked. I just kind of go with it. The message is the same. Somehow what I want to say about growing older with positive spin, about loving life, living fully, loving well, that comes out regardless of there being like the perfect question. I do like to tell stories, and I will tell you a little story about a couple that I met here. And I live in a place called Steiner Ranch, which is kind of on the edges of Austin, Texas. And up the hill from me is a place called the Steiner Ranch Steakhouse. And my husband and I like to go up there sometimes, and especially in the summertime. Austin has a ton of music everywhere, and they always have live bands. And so we were up there about a year and a half ago, 2 years ago, I guess it is now. And there was a band, and they had a horn section, and they had backup girl singers, and they were awesome. And I noticed out of the corner of my eye that this older couple, older being a relative term at my age, but this older couple is being led to the table by the waitress. And He's got to be in his 90s. He's wearing like a Korean War veteran baseball hat with all kinds of pins on it. And she's got to be close to his age too. And they sit down at this table, and he picks up his placemat and he moves it over next to her, and he slides his chair around so that he's sitting right next to his lady. And then I see him put his hand under the table, and they hold hands. And I say to my husband, I nudge him and I said, "Isn't that sweet? Isn't that just the best?" So the music starts in again. And this couple sitting there, and I just can't help but, look at them. I think they're so adorable. And they're kind of swaying with the music. And all at once they get up and they dance. Oh my gosh. It was amazing. She had all these moves. He was a little stiff, but he kind of like danced around her, like she was the center of his universe and he was just going to orbit around her. And then the slow songs would come and she would rest her head on his chest. And I looked around the restaurant, and it's like everyone was watching this couple. Everybody wanted to be them. And I said to my husband, they're showing us how it's done.
Oh, yeah, that's what I'm talking about, indeed.
It's a
That's,
good story.
that's right. Darn right it is. It's like, yeah, letting the
Yeah.
folks know that the fire's still burning.
Fire's still burning. Yeah, they didn't miss a beat, and they inspired me. I went, well, I hope that's me at 90.
Oh, I'm confident it will be. I'm confident that it will be. Yes, indeed. That's right. Only 30 years to go.
There you go.
That's right. Three magical decades, indeed. So that's what I'm talking about right there, being inspired by the masses. So you got this fabulous new book out that came out a couple weeks ago called A Delightful Little Book on Aging. So tell us a bit about the fabulous book and what led you to writing it.
Hmm. A delightful little book on aging is a compilation piece of articles and blog posts that I had written over the last few years when I stumbled across the aging movement for a large website called 60 And I started to get amazing feedback from women who said, wow, I really relate to that, and I'm 65 or I'm 66 and I'm just not ready to stop. And I went, wow, there's really a movement out there. It's not just something that I'm thinking, it's a whole movement and a message. So this was put together in that way, and I organized the pieces. Some pieces are new, but some pieces were articles that had appeared in the newspaper or on the blog posts. And I organized it into 4 sections. I organized it into grief, reclamation, vision, and laughter. Aging begins in grief. It happens against a backdrop of grief. You understand what loss is as you get older, and you understand that loss is a cycle. It's not meant to be like aging. It's not meant to be the end point. It's meant to be a cycle. And with loss, there's love. And without love, the loss is unbearable. But without loss, we never know fully the depths of love. So this is a time when we give our hearts to sorrow and we give our hearts to celebration. And then the second section of the book is reclamation. That older age is a time when many of us go back and reclaim something that we had left behind. For me, it was writing. I got married. I had a business to run with my husband. I had all the responsibilities of marriage. And so, writing, it was something that took a back seat. So later on in my 60s, I was able to reclaim that for myself. For my husband, who still works from home, by the way, he remembered the musician he was as a young man. And now every night after dinner, he goes upstairs and he plays the bass. And because we have, the internet, which didn't exist 30 years ago, he can play bass with any rock and roll band anywhere. And that's what he does in the evenings. He reclaimed that part of himself. We can reclaim parts of ourselves that we maybe didn't like very much, that now at this point in our life we have a greater compassion for. So reclamation, vision. When I was a young woman and I used to go on job interviews, ultimately some HR director would ask me, where do you see yourself in 5 years? Or where do you see yourself in 10 years? And this is actually the perfect time to be asking that same question. I may only have 2 decades left. So I want to make the most of them. So where do I see myself? Who do I want to be? How do I want to be in the world? What do I want to be doing with my life that makes me feel deeply satisfied and like I'm contributing? So vision. And then the final section of the book is about laughter, because we all know, and we all learned it a long time ago, laughter helps you through the worst of times, and it helps you celebrate the best of times. So that's a delightful little book on aging.
Oh, yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. So, do you find that when your husband practices bass guitar, does it make for great background music and when you do writing?
Sometimes I like hearing him play. And he's joined a couple of online bass things where they give you a challenge, to like create a bass line to a certain piece of music. And then you record them and you post them and you get feedback from your peers. And so oftentimes he'll play the recordings for me. And of course, our musical tastes are still stuck. we're stuck back in the 1980s somewhere. um, the 60s, 70s, and 80s were really that was really the era of our generation's music. So he still loves to play that old music, but he's gotten turned on to some new stuff too. So he played trombone when he was a kid. So he has a very orchestral ear, a symphonic ear for his bass lines. And I just think it's cool. It just makes me happy to see him create in that way.
Sweet. That's what I'm talking about, indeed. Timeless music for decades to come and learning how to play it. That's what I'm talking about. That's right, indeed. So, and speaking of timeless, we're coming down to the question that every guest gets to receive, and that is if you were to wake up tomorrow and you were 25 again, but this time in 2020 with all of your amassed knowledge and experience, what advice would you give to yourself?
Oh my gosh. The advice I'd give to myself was go ahead and take yourself seriously, but make sure you give yourself some time to laugh.
Oh, yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. Funny enough, some folks may think so. Hey, that's kind of a contradiction, isn't it? Oh, man. But the good news is it's not because if you truly understand it, it's so true. Because heck, I laugh every day and I take life seriously. Because it's like, you know what?
Yeah,
Life is a game, but darn it, I need to laugh to keep myself sane.
absolutely.
That's right. Funny enough, if you were 25, you'd have to change your whole marketing strategy, probably,
Boy,
right?
I'm telling you, I just can't even imagine 25 again. I don't think it's something I'd want to return to. But I love the 25-year-olds that are in my life. I love the young people that are in my life. I have great nieces and great great nieces, and they're wonderful people. It's just I think it's hard. You're finding yourself in your 20s. You're setting a course. You don't have a sense of destiny yet, and probably not a sense of purpose yet. And those are things that come with older age: a sense of purposefulness, a sense of intent with how one chooses to live. And 20s isn't the time for that. 20s is the time for a little bit of wild and hopefully not too much reckless, but enough for a good story.
Ah, yes, indeed. I'm pretty sure we're going to get some more stories like that from you in the next book, right?
You bet.
Woohoo! All righty. That's right. Be on the lookout. Stories from my 20s in the decade of the 20s in 2020.
Right, right.
Ah, man. Woohoo! Well, for those who want to keep in magical contact with the sensational Stephanie and all that she's doing, what's the best way for folks to reach out to you?
You can find me on my website, stephanieraffelock.com. And there's a contact form on there that will allow you to email me. I answer all my emails. You can find me on Facebook, Stephanie Raffelock /author. And you can find me on Instagram at @sraffelock. And of course, you can listen to me on Coffee Table Wisdom, wherever you get your podcasts.
Woohoo! That's right, folks. There you have it. Follow the fabulous Stephanie. That's right. She's got all this great content out there for you, especially about aging. For those who are scared that they're getting closer and closer to that magical age of 37. That's right.
37. What a magical age. Yep.
That's right. The AARP cards are calling. Yes, indeed. Let me stop.
It's shocking when you get your first ad for AARP. Everybody wants to go, how did this happen?
Yeah, and why do they give you my information? Like, stop it.
Right.
Woohoo! So, any parting words for the folks still listening?
Well, for the folks still listening, I'd love to hear from you. Live with an authentic heart, live happy, be well, tell the people around you that you love them. Life is good.
How's it going, you super special, awesome human? Since you made it to the end of this episode, it looks like you really enjoyed yourself. Since you enjoyed this episode, be sure to share it with at least 3 people in your network and tell them what you really liked about this episode. Heck, even shoot myself or the guest an email and let them know what you liked most about this interview so that way they can stay inspired to keep pushing out great work.